Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
So this month it is Curiosity is Your Superpower. And I think my basic question for you today is, what is your relationship with curiosity? This whole year is your spiritual journey, the greatest love story ever told. So inherent in your spiritual journey, somewhere along the way, has been curiosity. Is it a really dynamic energy in your life? Is it a subtle energy? What is your relationship with curiosity? We know that children ask a ton of questions. We all know that. The one group that I was listening to said in their research, kids would ask up to 300 questions a day. That's a whole lot of questions. And a lot of them are why. People are meaning-making machines. We want to know why certain things are happening. And interestingly, they were also saying that today, in this day and age, they're asking people about how they felt about robots. And a lot of people feel like robots are going to take over. Artificial intelligence is going to take over a lot of jobs. But the one question that artificial intelligence thus far does not ask is why. They don't make meaning. We make the meaning. So interestingly, what they found is by middle school, those questions have stopped almost completely. Isn't that amazing? That the nature of the questions change to, how do I fit in with my friends? What do I need to do to pass this test? What information do I need to know to get the good grade? You're in high school, what's your future plans? What are you going to do to make money for the rest of your life? They become very practical questions that start to dominate many people's lives. The predominant people is, with the research, was that they're now shifting their questions from curiosity to wonder of how the world works, why do we do this, why do we do that, to what can I do to fit in, to do well. So for me, the way I interpreted that was they became questions that went from thriving to surviving. The questions got really focused on what do I need to do to survive. And interestingly, it continues on. I remember when I was working at Dominion Hospital, I have absolutely no idea what I was saying, but a doctor came up to me who worked there, and he said, "Why do you keep having these conversations? Those are conversations that were meant to be in college. Yes, you're sitting around and talking about the meaning of life, but you've been out of college for a long time now. Why are you still having these conversations?" And the thing that struck me was I had no idea what he was talking about. So clearly, he was hearing something that I wasn't hearing, and he was really agitated with me. He was very upset with me. And it also, thirdly, was, let's have lunch. I really want to spend time with you. I didn't do that because there was a lot going on that I didn't understand. But my bet is for doctors, knowing the answer is very important. People are coming to you all the time with life-threatening diseases, or even if they're not life-threatening, pain, suffering, and they come to you for the answer. To have someone who is enjoying being in the question might feel somewhat threatening. What is your relationship with being curious? As a child, as a middle schooler, as a high school young adult, right now in your life, what is your relationship with curiosity? We know that one of the greatest ways to keep our youthfulness going as we age is to continue to nurture our curiosity, to not know the answers, to be curious about what works. So I wish I'd gotten their names, but there's these two researchers who were talking about, one is the head of SurveyMonkey, and I don't remember what the other one does. But they were looking at people who always felt comfortable asking questions. And obviously they're the inventors a lot of times, the Wright brothers. But also they were looking at Nobel laureates, Bill Gates. These are people who are actively curious still. Bill Gates he gets a topic in his head and he starts reading, he's reading and reading to learn about it. He continues to expand his understanding. Bill, what's his name? Brian Glazer, who is a producer, and we've seen most of his movies, but I can't remember the movies at the moment. When he was a student, he didn't do well. And he had a teacher who said, "You're going to be really successful in life." And he said, "Based on what?" I just really tanking on these classes. And the teacher said, "But you're really curious." And he said, "That curiosity is why you're going to do really well in life." And then he went to college. Nothing really stood out, but he had one professor that he particularly liked. So he went after he graduated, he went to the professor. He said, "I just really love to spend 10 minutes with you. Can I just have a cup of coffee and let's talk 10 minutes?" And the professor said, "Why?" He says, "I don't know. I just really like this class. I just want to spend time with you." And they ended up spending an hour and a half. And he said it was such a rich and amazing conversation. And that's when he realized he really loved learning and being curious. So he has actually implemented a structure in his life to cultivate his curiosity. So still, and I find this amazing, every 2 weeks, that's a lot, that's 26 times, 26 people a year, he meets with someone who is outside the entertainment world. So it can't be anyone in the entertainment world, and he just sits down and has a conversation with them to learn about what they know. Isn't that awesome? Just that level of curiosity. It's not with an agenda. It's not because he's trying to make a movie better. He's just curious. He just wants to learn more, expand his horizons. What is your relationship with curiosity today? Do you have a structure in your life of how you dance with it, how you play with it? The way I look at curiosity, and this just popped in my head when I was writing the weekly email, but unfortunately I'm not a gardener, so I use a gardening metaphor for someone who doesn't garden. So you're just going to have to forgive me. Just I recognize my ignorance. But the way I look at curiosity is there's 3 different levels. One is the one that you use with a trowel, because I might not be a gardener, but when I was a kid, my dad had me plant in these little pansies and petunias, and sometimes I don't know what we were planting, but he would just have me put a little seed and stick it under the dirt. So it's just underneath the surface. It's not grown yet. You're just sticking it in. And the fruits were, the output was beautiful. I love pretty flowers, pretty colors. It's just under the surface. To me, that's one level of curiosity. Now, in the old days, that curiosity sometimes got fulfilled and sometimes it didn't because it might not be hugely important. But in our world today, with Google, woohoo! Come on, when you have a question, don't you just Google it right away? I love it. I think it's so fun. I learned so many random things that I would never look up normally. I'm not curious enough to go search it for an answer, but now that I have Google, I'll get an answer, right? To me, that's like Google level curiosity. I think it's like headline curiosity. I like to know what the headlines are. I like to know generally what's going on. And it could even be gossip. I think the word gossip has such a negative impact, and I think it's because the place from which it's coming. But information, oh, did you know so-and-so got divorced? Oh, did you know so-and-so had a baby? That's just information. Whether it's good or bad comes from the intent of which it's shared, but it's still information that we like to know. And you might be in the know, like, oh, I didn't know they were dating. It's not a public thing yet, so it's just underneath the surface. You're curious, you're interested. Oh, I see them hanging out a lot. Is there something going on there? To me, that's like cool, curious information. I love to know it. It's neither bad or good. It's just cool. So that's like trowel level curiosity. And I think we all have it, and we see it every day. Then there's the next much deeper level that we have with our spade or our shovel. And that's when I used to see my dad literally out in, this is Cleveland, snow's up to here, and he's digging these huge holes. In my head, I remember there were iris bulbs that he was planting, they're annual, and he loved the flowers, so he would be out in the winter digging these deep holes. For us, that level of curiosity is something that we are going to spend a lot of time on. And it's not about every topic, but we all have our thing. And I think, I don't know, I haven't done a survey on it. I'll find out more this month because you'll tell me. I think we all have something that we have been curious about almost our whole life, that we couldn't help not thinking about it and wanting to learn more about, even if we tried. Like, I think of Jack in music. He's been passionate about music his entire life. He will never, to the day he leaves his body, ever stop looking and exploring music, doing things in different ways, learning, doing something. Sometimes it has an end goal, and sometimes, but even if it didn't have an end goal, he'd still do it. Or Julian loves sports, and he's not going to not think about sports. No matter what happens, that's going to be a curiosity that he has, that he engages in. He looks it up. He's curious. It's been motivating him since he was 2 years old. This thing is sports. For spirituality and psychology, emotions, I've always been interested in. I couldn't not think about it if I tried. I couldn't not read about it and want to learn more about it and study it and ask questions about it if I tried. What is that for you? What are those deep level curiosities that you have that you are willing to even make yourself uncomfortable for sometimes, but you have to know? Because curiosity is what drives us, what evolves us. Ernest Holmes talks about that curiosity is one of the main energies behind our evolutionary process. Because think about it, when you start asking a question, like we heard in Rilke, it'll take you can't necessarily get it with your conscious mind because you don't know the answer. So you have to go beyond what you already know. So curiosity is always pushing us beyond the boundaries of what we already know. It's always pushing us just beyond, and isn't that what evolution is? It's pushing us beyond. And it's exciting, and it's interesting, and we have to know. We are born to be curious about certain topics. We have these patterns in our life. We've always had these, we're habit patterns. What are the patterns? And we think of that as a negative thing. I think we have such a bad idea about habits, but we're all patterns. We couldn't not be a pattern. So what are the patterns on your spiritual journey that you have been asking questions about, that you've been curious about, that you just seek to know? And I was using topics, but it could be, what about people excites you? What about your social life? It could be about community. It could be about organization. It could be about social justice. It could be about anything, but what is that thing or things that I just saw Jay, and like I can't imagine him not being interested in history. It's just, there's things that just animate us and bring us alive. What is that for you? And then going back to the Brian Glaser thing, are we allowing ourselves to learn from other people's curiosity? So it's not just my curiosity, but if someone is in tune with their curiosity, am I willing to sit down and have coffee with them and say, tell me what's getting you excited? I mean, those are the best conversations, aren't they? Like, what have you been thinking about? What have you been reading about? What have you been studying? Tell me that perspective. We live in an infinite universe with infinite perspectives, and we have all these amazing experts surrounding us. Do we allow ourselves to engage in these conversations with one another and be open to what someone else is seeing and their perspective and what they're passionate about? And share what our passion is. I've learned more about music since I've been married to Jack than I've ever known. And it's fun and it's interesting because he's passionate about it, because he loves it. Are you sharing your gifts of passion with other people? So even as you're learning about it, you're also sharing it with others. And then the final level of curiosity is probably the scariest level. That's the excavator. I had to look it up. It's those big machines that really take, and they just, generally that is not something we seek because it's very disruptive to our lives, disorienting, it's upending. So it could be anything from a divorce, a death, feeling like someone betrayed us, some breakdown that we've had, something that's major, that rips up the very roots of something that we might believe. Not everything, this is important. Not everything that we believe, but some really serious things that we identified with. and we get disoriented, and it's terrifying, and it's scary. I was listening to this gentleman named Drew Lynch, and he was talking, it was a TED Talk, and he was talking about how he had this great ambition to be an actor, and he started from 11 years old. He was taking a bus by himself, going to classes, reading all the playwrights, including Shakespeare, and he was driven, and he was doing very well, and I sort of tuned out, so I don't know all his details, but he was doing very well and getting offered all these jobs, and this is into college, and Hollywood's interested in him, and he's playing shortstop. They're out playing, and he's playing shortstop, and a ball hits him in the lung and knocks him backwards, and he hits his head. And the result of that incident is that he has become a lifelong stutterer. And they've had all these doctors, people. It was an interesting case. You're trying to figure out what was causing, and they can't quite get it. So he went through the list of everything he did, Western medicine, Eastern medicine, everything, to try to heal this, and it's gotten a lot better. But talk about an excavation. Those are the kind of excavations in our life that we don't look for, right? But they happen, sadly. Or not sadly, but it feels sadly at the time. And so he had, of course, went through so much for years. And then he found he could do stand-up comedy. And he was trying to do a tape to send to the comedy store, but he could never get through a whole set without people heckling him, because he would stop because of the stutter. He doesn't talk always with a stutter, but it'll come up. And so his talk was very slow, and which is amazingly engaging. And the pain of the heckling, of how hard it was, even as he's done so much work on himself and is beginning to find some peace. And what he just said was, what I've learned, he's had many learning, but the first thing is where he really started to heal was when he became curious about what was happening in his life, rather than this shouldn't be happening. The analogy he used, which I think we can all relate to, he said, "You ever walk into a door and you push it, and you're supposed to pull it?" And he said, "I spent my life just like kicking at that door, like, why won't you open? I'm pushing you." And that's what he felt like. I had done all this stuff. Why was this happening? He wanted to move forward on his life, and the door wasn't letting him. And then his other analogy, which I just love so much, he said, we think we have this idea, often with any desire that we want, that it's a straight line. So here's the path to get where I want. And he says, you're driving along, and then suddenly there's a block, and they say, there's a detour like this. And so we think he said, I'll use it. I thought in my mind that I was supposed to be going this way. The detour, so that became my obstacle, and the detour was this really long way that I wasn't supposed to go. He said, but what if we just took the word detour? What if all along my path was supposed to go like this? That it's taken him to himself. He's become more himself because of this. It's not a detour. It's actually the exact right path he's supposed to be on. He's discovering this in his curiosity about his path. And that all of our paths, we have these detours, but they're not really detours. They're exactly what's supposed to be happening. When we allow ourselves to get out of, it should be this way, which is the concrete thinking, and curiosity is like, oh, well, this is a different way. What could this way be? I mean, when I listened to him, his TED Talk, it wasn't because, I liked his talk and I liked the substance of it. But generally, when I'm listening to TED Talks, there's some, especially, wow, curiosity is a superpower, tons. So I just sort of skim through and see if I hear something that interests me. I listened to every word he said. He just pulled me, and I wasn't looking at the clock. I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, I have to hurry up. His whole being, his presence magnetized me. He has become so completely, just stood so completely still up there. He might have walked, I don't even know, but I just felt the stillness at the center of his being. He became more himself through his journey than he ever would have if he had just gone this path towards acting and ambition. And he's done very well, and he's had these different, and then he was on, I don't know, one of those shows, America's Got Talent or something, and he almost made it, but he didn't quite. He said, I had my ambition, my linear idea, but it took me to another place. So I stopped trying to have my linear idea of ambition, a destination, and I just started allowing my heart and my intuition to guide me, and I stopped planning everything, and I started a YouTube channel. I bought things that I didn't have money for. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. I just started saying yes to it every moment, and I have now 2 million followers following me, sharing my curiosity. I'm always trying to do something different. Every week I want to explore something different with my dog. I let my curiosity guide me. I let my intuition guide me instead of being direct. Didn't mean he doesn't have success, but he allowed his curiosity to be the leader. He stopped having an agenda. When Brian Glazer meets with those people, he's not having an agenda. I want to make my movies better, so I'm meeting with you. It's just, I want to know you. I want to have understanding. We are meaning-making machines. We ask why because we're curious. We want to understand. And when there's something painful, it's more intense. And so I'm thinking about even what's going on. What's interesting, listening to that song, I think that came out in the 60s, early 70s. But we feel it just as intensely now. And we may not have any clearer answers, but we feel that it's up. We feel what's happening in our culture is being upended at that excavation level. Wait a minute, can we trust our justice system? Can we trust our police officers, the things that we have counted on in the past? Or some people have counted on in the past. Can we trust the structures? So what's happening, there's this, the postmodern world is what they say is a deconstruction. It's taking sort of all these structures that we had faith in and we believed in, and they're falling apart. And it's disorienting, it's excavating. But the important thing to understand about all of us when we're excavating, the true essence is always there. That never gets thrown out. A horrible thing can happen to Jack. I'm just using him because it's obvious. But it will never stop him from loving and being curious about music. He can have something that was very painful, but it's not going to turn him away from his true essence. So it's learning to trust that true essence. They were saying that the people who tended to ask questions were authorized when they were young to ask questions. They had some sort of, like Brian Glazer, his teacher, who said, it's because you're curious. It was made okay. And I was thinking about that because that's certainly true in my family. Asking questions was key. But I also think it's something else, because I've met so many people who've come from a religion that was very restrictive. But what I hear people saying over and over is, I knew that wasn't true. I knew what they were saying, that half the population is going to go to hell. I knew as a kid that, I knew that. And once you know and trust that thing inside of you, and you know that what you're hearing out there is not necessarily right, you start trusting yourself. So I think curiosity comes from a place of trust. So we can be safe to be curious. I guess that's the question. That's what I'm trying to get to is, people who feel safe ask questions. People who don't feel safe are trying to fit in and survive. And so what we want to know is that in spirituality, we are always safe. So it's okay to ask questions. There's an old history around, I think most religions, is that if you ask questions, you're moving into a danger zone. You're going to get in trouble. Something bad's going to happen. But when we move into this teaching where we realize it doesn't come and go, you are loved no matter what. You can ask all the questions you want. You will never stop being loved. You can excavate your deepest things that you held on to that you thought you had to have to survive, and then they get excavated out of there, just like in Drew's life. He thought he had to have this thing, and it got excavated out there, but his essence, untouched. The power of his beingness, untouched. And when we know that, that allows us to explore with freedom and with a joy, with a playfulness. He said his curiosity became playful, which is why he went into stand-up comedy. He said, I just started being, I wish I could remember some of his jokes, they were funny. But I was being playful with what happened as opposed to this is a horrible, horrible thing. Curiosity only comes from a sense of play. Bill Gates is not learning what he's learning out of pain and suffering. It's because he feels safe. Actually, they were looking at who shows the most curiosity. And by the way, I think we are a community of leaders. When I very first became a minister, I still remember to this day, my topic was leaders of light, that we are all leaders of light because we know who and what we really are. When you know who and what you really are, made from the image and likeness of pure spirit, that you are the infinite love intelligence expressing out into the world, you are a leader. And what they found is that it was the leaders who were the most curious. And the people who were the most unhappy were the people who were following what other people were saying. So going back to the whole structure of what's happening out in our world, it feels like structures are falling apart. What we know is that that's only partially true. They are falling apart, but what's real is absolutely there and it's solid. That there's things that we can trust. The goodness of pure spirit is operating. Something even better is coming, and it doesn't mean all institutions need to be annihilated. Like, a lot of people show, and I wish I had memorized it, but Buckminster's quote, which I now no longer subscribe to, which is, if something's not working, rather than fight it, just start something completely new. But that's assuming that everything that came before didn't have this incredible wisdom to it. That's part of curiosity. You don't throw away your whole personality. Drew, I forgot his name now. Drew, the guy I've been talking about, he didn't throw away everything he had learned. Say, well, I can't be an actor now, so all that's useless. You take those things that last, the music, the sports, the spirituality, what is in you that's always been there. You take that, and as everything else is getting excavated, you lean into what you know that you know that you know about who and what you really are. Who and what you really are, your patterns. What is your relationship to curiosity is telling you a lot about who you have always been and always will be, and that is the source of the strength. And we can do that collectively and organizationally, even as we may excavate external things, organizational structures, if we remember who the patterns of who we have always been. We begin to trust those structures, and so we feel a little bit of greater freedom in asking the questions. We get afraid to ask questions if we feel like we can't trust those structures. So, as you are looking about what is your relationship with curiosity, you're also looking at your relationship with what you know to be true. I remember when I was in my philosophy class, I talked a bit about it a couple of weeks ago. The philosophy teacher was talking about Descartes. And Descartes was trying to figure out the world, and he had this theory of, or was asking, well, what if there's an evil genius running the world and we're just doing everything the evil genius says? Well, that really just made me uncomfortable because I could imagine that. I'm like, wow. Like, I had this whole experience of divine love, but what if beyond the divine love was this evil genius making me have this experience of divine love? And now we have the virtual world, and we have, there's a movie, Free Guy, where the virtual character wakes up in the virtual reality. I'm like, oh my gosh, are we a virtual reality? These questions get very challenging, but I can ask them and I explore them. I went through a period, I said, 3 weeks, I'm going to live my life as if no divine presence existed. I am a complete materialist, 5 senses, that's all that's real. This is a material world. We all die and go into nothingness once over. I just want to see what it's like. And I banished all those ideas from my head. And for 3 weeks, lived that way. Totally fascinating. But I could do something like that because I knew that I knew that I knew. I know that love is source. I'm not worried about it. So I can push against it because I know that I know that I know I can never hurt, harm, or endanger love. I'm not going to stop love from being love. I'm not going to stop myself from being love. And this is important because on the spiritual journey, so many people are told that they are going to be rejected. I won't even say, there was a group of people, and it was amazing to me how many people who have been on the spiritual progressive path, but in thinking for themselves and doing their own thing, I've had, actually these are just been one-on-one conversations from people in the group. How many people say, well, I don't know if I belong in this group anymore. Are they going to excommunicate me? I'm like, wait, what? We don't there's nothing to excommunicate you from, but all these old ideas. If I go too far, I'm not going to be welcome in this room. There's no room at the table for me at this organization because I've just gone a little bit too far. I am going to be asked to leave, or I just don't belong because I am so different. And a friend of mine and I were talking like, this person thinks that, and this person thinks that, and they all think different things. I'm like, who thinks they belong to this organization? Because everyone thinks they're different. When we know that we know who and what we are, we always belong. You always belong. It is impossible to be excommunicated from God's love, from this divine love. Impossible. There's nothing that you could say, think, question, doubt, wonder, be curious about, explore, discover, and be outside of God's love. So that is the place where we start, that our curiosity is freer, more joyful, more fun, and more play when we know that no matter what we ask, there's always love. What is your relationship with curiosity? Knowing that you are always loved, what has it been and what is it today? Because that relationship with curiosity is the very engine of your growth and your expansion as a spiritual and human being on this planet. Yeah? Yeah, it's going to be a great month. Okay, well, let's pray. You want to pray? Yes. Yay, prayer. And the way prayer works, we talk about how we're all one. So the words are coming out of my mouth, but it's the consciousness that is here, everywhere. And I'm just going to be honest about how I listen. Some of you are very auditory and listen to words. When I used to listen to Reverend Michael pray, I actually rarely heard what he was saying because I was hearing more of the vibration that we were all in, the collective consciousness. So as we go into prayer, the words are actually on the surface. The words that are coming out. But the place from which it's coming is at the trowel level, at the spade level, and the excavator level. It's coming from the depth from all of us. We're all right now participating and expressing this prayer. The words are coming out of mine on the surface, but underneath, we're all creating this prayer together. Yeah? So let's all pray together now. Thank you for being the consciousness in this room and online. So we begin with just prayer, a bit breath. Just allow that breath to anchor us fully in this moment. And the greatest thing to remember is to remember that no matter what, all is well. Right now, just breathe, all is well. And nothing ever can take us out of this all is well presence. Whatever the words or the language that vibrates with our soul, whether it's infinitely good, infinitely love, infinitely wise, infinitely peaceful, infinitely whole, whatever that word or words are, they radiate wellness, that we are well. All is well. We don't need to force anything. We don't need to fear anything. Ever. All is well. All is fundamentally well right where we are and in this entire cosmos. There are times on our earth experience where there's intense challenges. Times are always intense challenges, and it seems to be heightening. The problems seem to be more intense. Climate change. So on Mount Washington this past week, it was 117 below zero. Crazy. There's the highs and there's the lows. There's the pain and there's the suffering, and then there's the joy and the celebration. It's all unfolding right now. And yet behind all of it, all is well. We open our heart and our body and our mind and our soul to absolutely anchor ourselves in that reality. So it's not just a concept. We recognize that what these words are pointing to is a reality that can never be changed. And we know that because we practice it every day of our life in the midst of the highs and the lows. We practice all is well. Breathe that in. Any place where you're feeling stress or anxiousness or something should be other than what it is, all is well. At the deepest level, all is well. As we feel what's happening in our world, all is well. All is well. And as we feel and know this around, through, and as us, as all creation, we feel it into the very depths of our being and our soul, and we feel our whole beautiful spiritual love story journey. All has been fundamentally well. Even those things that seem so impossible, so beyond description, yet underneath, we can't understand it so much of the time, and yet all is well. We invite and ask and are curious about how could that possibly be? How could it be all we could? How could we even say something so crazy to say all is well when we know there's pain or suffering? How do we say that? Let us be open to that curiosity because we are safe. We can ask that question and go as deep as we need to go into that question because at the depth of our spiritual life, we know that we know that we know all is well. So we invite those questions into our life. We invite the easy questions. We invite the questions that ignite our passions. And we invite the very difficult and painful questions. We invite it all in. We welcome it to the extent that we are ready. We invite those questions in to animate our life to be a life of adventurers and discoverers of wisdom. All is well. And in this all is well, there's beautiful, amazing things. Today we give fun, just a beautiful, wonderful celebration. Our beautiful community member, Beta Salamet, her daughter, Camelia, just had her daughter, Mila, last evening. This beautiful new life, Mila, we bless her. We give thanks for her. We celebrate her beautiful, radiant life into this world. A life of love, a life of wonder and joy and curiosity and creativity and abundance. And we know that for the mother and the father and for the grandparents and all that love Mila. We celebrate and we support through all the experiences from this foundation of all is well. And as we deepen and deepen until that all is well, we start to really deepen and know this presence of love. This love that has sourced and sustained us our entire life, this love that was here before we were ever birthed, and this love that will follow us until the end of time and then beyond time, this love that is infinite beyond concept, and yet this love that is fully present here and now, that we can never be outside this love. There is no death in love. There is no separation in love. There is only this one love, and it animates all planet Earth, all sentient life form, all the cosmos and the galaxies. It animates all of us here and now. This all is well goes deeper and wider and fuller into pure, unlimited, ecstatic love that is alive and vibrating at every cell and atom of our beingness. It animates our questions. It animates our life. It is love itself that is asking these questions. It is love itself that is exploring and opening. It is love itself that is healing and revealing its presence in our life every day. We are this love. We hold this for one another, for all beings everywhere. We just say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, love itself. Knowing that it is from this place we know heaven is on earth now. And we divinely and joyfully say, and so it is. Amen.
I walk in God in all that I say.